She was made to kill, but she gave up everything to save a delivery man.
The Shadowlands. The scream of a plasma engine tore through HFY 9 station like an electric storm. The glass corridors trembled slightly as waves of ionized gas pulsed past, casting streaks of violet-blue light across the deck. Bay door 12 slid open, and Kael'yn Vey'nar stepped through, silent as a ghost, yet the entire station seemed to hold its breath. She was taller than most species on board, just shy of 2 meters, with a frame built for war and features sharp as if carved from obsidian. Her armor, a hybrid of Vey'nar steel and living alloy, pulsed faintly in sync with her heartbeat, each step ringing like a death knell. On her left shoulder, a mark in ancient rune, Tvekshar, a title reserved for those who had slain over 100 enemies with their bare hands. The name Kael'yn Vey'nar had once brought the Droth Empire to its knees in a single campaign. But here, she was just a visitor, and her presence alone was enough to make everyone in the corridor recoil, silent, as if awaiting judgment. A Tleth boy slipped from his mother's grasp at the sight of her, curiosity quickly smothered by instinct. A veteran from the Borealis front spotted the insignia on her armor and snapped to attention, saluting with the hand, not holding his coffee cup. No one dared stand in her way. No one, except him. At the far end of the hallway stood Jonas Reed, blocking the path with a datapad in one hand, muttering something under his breath, utterly unaware, until the echo of armored boots shattered the space between them. She stopped less than 3 paces away. Jonas looked up, steel gray eyes meeting hers. A flicker passed through his face, and then nothing. No fear, no panic, none of the shrinking, trembling responses she'd grown used to. Just a raised eyebrow and a dry mutter. Perfect. A fully armored assassin shows up, right, when I'm 2 hours late on a delivery. You gonna kill me for standing on the wrong line? Kael'yn Vey'nar. The insult wasn't in the words, it was in the tone. Casual, indifferent. He dared to mock her, Kael'yn Vey'nar, the shadow of Varys Prime, as if she were just another checkpoint on his tired, underpaid route. She tilted her head, studying him. This man, clad in grease-stained overalls, hair a tangled mess like it hadn't seen water in days, but his eyes, there was something broken in them, carefully hidden, the look of someone who'd lost more than they were supposed to. "Do you know who I am?" she asked, her voice low and cold, like the dead face of a moon. Jonas shrugged. Someone with a very heavy fashion sense? Or maybe someone I'm supposed to be afraid of? Silence. How long had it been since anyone spoke to her like that? For a strange moment, the station's recycled breeze stirred across her armor, not carrying the acrid scent of plasma, but something else. Something alive. Kael'yn took one step closer. He didn't flinch. "I could crush you in 3 seconds," she said. Jonas smirked. "Then make it quick. I got a shipment due at Moonport 3 and 4 hours." A beat of silence. And then Kael'yn smiled. A fleeting curl of the lips, sharp and rare, like a falling star. She stepped aside, and somehow, against her better judgment, added, "Do you have a name, fearless one?" Jonas glanced back, suspicion still lingering in his gaze. Jonas Reed. And if you didn't kill me for that last comment, I'm guessing we'll meet again." Kael'yn watched him go, feeling a weight lift from her chest, a weight she hadn't even known she was carrying. The man who mocked death. Cargo Bay D-17 was the wildest jungle in all of HFY 9, a labyrinth of sparking cables, rusting containers stacked like tombstones, and a symphony of curses hurled in every galactic tongue imaginable. The air itself stank of scorched mech tissue and synthetic fuel thick enough to chew. Jonas Reed shot through the corridors like a missile, his boots smashing into a stray energy canister, just in time for a spark of plasma to kiss the edge of his pants. He hissed, not from pain, but because his calm was blaring. "Reed?" If you don't get that crate delivered in 30 minutes, don't even bother coming back. I swear, I'll assign you to scrub the toxin deck toilets for a year. Jonas let out a dry chuckle. Perfect. Just one more reason to finally end it all. He skidded to a halt beside crate ZV 8899. It gave off a faint vibration, a bad sign. According to the manifest, it held a Draven, a reptilian beast the size of a shuttlecraft, capable of ripping a freighter in half if it sneezed wrong. I should have been a poet, he muttered, slapping a remote NAV tag onto the crate and beginning the transport sequence. Then came the soft beep, a motion alert. Unauthorized. Behind him. He spun around, hand already brushing the grip of his shock pistol. And there she was. Kael'yn Thatra, standing like a shadow peeled from the wall. Silent. Watching. You stalking me now? Jonas asked. No. Passing by. And curious. Jonas blinked. Curious? She? About him? Curious? You? About me? Not you. Your recklessness. She stepped closer, her eyes flicking to the vibrating crate. You're moving a live Draven. Alone? No escort? No armor. Jonas glanced down at the scorch mark on his trousers. Hey, I've got luck. And insurance. Kael'yn raised an eyebrow, not at the words but the tone. No fear. No complaint. Just acceptance. And forward motion. You don't value your life? Oh, I do. Just not as much as I used to. That gave her pause. She knew that feeling. The kind of loss that strips you so bare, there's nothing left for the universe to take. A screaming silence in your bones. She had lived inside that feeling for over a decade. Jonas returned to the control panel. Kael'yn didn't move. You're Jonas. You live alone. You asking me out? She tilted her head. And for the second time that day, she smiled. No one had ever dared to joke with her and live to see the next sunrise. But Jonas? He made it sound like breathing. There's a place on Deck F, synthetic meats, edible. Jonas squinted at her. Wait, was that a real dinner invitation? Don't flatter yourself. I just don't like eating alone. I'll put that on my tombstone. She held his gaze for a beat, then gave a tiny nod, permission granted. 17 minutes later, they sat across from each other in a neon-lit dive. Fluorescent green lights flickered off the steel table. The droid waiter nearly short-circuited at the sight of Kael'yn, but she simply pointed to the menu. 2. Synth meat, spiced enough to melt neurons. Jonas gave her a sideways glance and smirked. I'll take that as your way of showing affection. Kael'yn picked up her electro-copsticks. No gloves. For the first time, Jonas saw the raw truth of her. Skin the color of storm clouds, veins traced in metallic lines, an ancient body reforged for war, survival, and silence. She lifted her food. And then, boom. The floor trembled. Lights flickered. Red warning glyphs lit the wall. Cargo Bay D, 17 breach detected. Unauthorized biolock override. Emergency. Emergency. Jonas shot to his feet. Kael'yn moved at the same moment. No words. No plan. Just one sharp glance between them. And they ran, a war-born executioner and a half-suicidal delivery man, straight into the storm. The surprise handshake. The D-17 floor blazed red under the warning lights. The Helion 9 station wailed its sirens, pulsing like the heartbeat of a dying beast. The security door struggled to close, but the leaking pneumatic seals made it shudder, as if the station itself were in panic. Jonas and Kael'yn sprinted through the infrastructure, the flickering lights barely casting enough to see. The air reeked of ozone and synthetic blood. The security screens flashed with a sharp cut through the biolocking system, a sign this wasn't an accident. Someone knows exactly what they're doing, Jonas muttered under his breath. Kael'yn stopped in front of the busted door, her silver eyes scanning the electromagnetic structure inside, like she was reading a digitized score. Then she whispered, cloaking tech. Small vibranium blade. Old school assassination style. I swear, it's like you're describing yourself. Jonas mumbled, half joking, half serious. The silence was sudden, too quiet. Both of them drew their weapons. The door at the end of the hallway slowly creaked open. A shadow shot toward them. No time to think. Reflexes took over. Kael'yn spun around. Jonas backed up. She tossed her weapon into the air, catching it with her bare hands, just as the creature charged. It was a draven. But what was strange, it wasn't attacking. It was trembling. Terrified. It wasn't it, Kael'yn said, her hand resting on the creature's throat. A kind of tactile communication. Then who? You look. Jonas turned just in time to see a nano device, no bigger than a fingertip, fall from the ceiling. A cloaking device, self-destructing. No traceable data, but enough to know someone was probing and targeting Kael'yn. For a fleeting moment, they stood amidst the wreckage, breathing heavily. Jonas looked at her, for the first time noticing a flicker of vulnerability in her icy exterior. Are you okay? No one ever asked that. After every battle. He hesitated for a beat, then, slowly, extended his hand. We're not strangers anymore. Let's call this a temporary alliance. Kael'yn studied his hand. It was sun-weathered, rough with scars, a worker's hand, lived in, real, nothing fake. In stark contrast to the command-slick hands she'd once had to obey back when she was a warrior of the Destruction Federation. She lifted her own hand, the metallic bone under her skin glowing faintly with blue light, and touched his. A spark of energy flickered to life. Not strong, not painful, but clear, a biological reaction that hadn't been classified yet. Both of them jerked their hands back, eyes locking. What just happened? Jonas asked, his voice a notch lower. Kael'yn took a half step back, her eyes narrowing. This isn't a regular alliance. Something activated. You mean that handshake? No. It's the compatibility. Some part of your genetic structure reacted with my bioarmor. Jonas squinted. If I hear biological compatibility one more time, I'm going to think we're getting married. Kael'yn didn't smile, but she didn't deny it either. A moment passed between them, where the distance wasn't measured in steps, but in heartbeats and fear. Then the alarm blared again. The station's AI system issued a warning. Unauthorized intruder still present on Helion 9. Priority mission, protect direct witness to bioactivation event, code name Jonas Reed. Both of them froze. I'm the witness? Jonas asked, panic creeping into his voice. No, you're the target. Kael'yn stepped forward, her gaze never leaving his face. From now on, I won't let you go alone. Sounds like you moving in with me. You got a room? Jonas froze for a second, then burst into laughter. Despite the emergency, despite the lurking enemy, despite the station possibly about to explode, he laughed, genuinely, for the first time in years. And for the first time in centuries, Kael'yn, the emotionless warrior created to feel nothing, felt something stir in her heart. A handshake, a touch, a bond beginning to form. The trap in the darkness, the burnt ozone stench clung tightly to the air, seeping into every gap in the armor and lungs. The lights on the ceiling of the 6th floor tech hallway flickered intermittently, like the dying breaths of a body on the verge of being drained of energy. The handshake earlier between Jonas and Kael'yn, seemingly a small gesture, had, in that moment, changed something. The air around them was charged with static electricity, and Kael'yn's sensors were flickering erratically. Jonas noticed the change in Kael'yn's gaze. She had become silent, sharp as a razor's edge. We're being watched, she said, her voice quiet but thick with vigilance. Jonas furrowed his brow. You're not kidding, right? She glanced at him, her look full of irritation. Do humans enjoy living carelessly? Jonas stifled a laugh, but inside, he felt the tension tighten like a guitar string. Her words were no longer a warning. They were a sentence. The T-47 corridor, once believed to be abandoned after the gas leak in 2316, now resembled a hell unpurged. Kael'yn led the way, each step heavy like the beats of a war drum. Her hand rested near her waist, where Veynar's thin armor could deploy biological weapons in an instant. Jonas followed behind, his hand resting on the old electromagnetic gun. Not the most powerful, but a companion he trusted. "This isn't the way to the cargo bay," Jonas whispered. "I know," Kael'yn replied, her eyes scanning the area. "There's an ambush ahead. They're luring us into the jaws of the tiger." Jonas sensed the temperature shift, not from the air conditioning, but from another presence. Something was moving. Very close. Very fast. Bam! A chunk of the wall was torn apart like paper. From the swirling dust, a black-armored creature lunged in. Huge. Mechanical, but with blood. A hybrid mercenary, biotech from the Third Interstellar Biowarfare War. Target identified. Its voice echoed like a sword scraping against stone. Kael'yn Vey'nar. Price, 700,000 credits. Priority, live, but dead is acceptable. Kael'yn didn't react. Not a word. Only a small tilt of her head, a combat posture of her people passed down through thousands of years. And the second target, Jonas asked, his hand gripping the gun. No price. The beast sneered, if it had lips. Surcharge, 200 if you leave a trace. Is that all? Jonas laughed. I'm offended. The battle began. The beast charged like a whirlwind. Its right arm was a plasma cannon, firing directly at Kael'yn. She leaned to the side, spinning, claws shooting from her wrists, shiny and sharp, cutting the air with a high-pitched hiss. She glided past the creature, leaving a violet streak across its armor. Jonas fired repeatedly, but his plasma shots couldn't pierce the armor. As Kael'yn drew the beast's attention, he rolled to the side, aiming for the exposed joint, the only weak point. Bam! A shot hit. The mechanical arm began smoking. The creature roared, turning to target Jonas. Kael'yn saw the look in its eyes. She didn't think. She didn't analyze. She leaped between him and the plasma beam that was about to strike. Zap! A streak of red flame cut through her body. Purple blood splattered, tearing through the air. Jonas shouted. Kael'yn collapsed into his arms. Her eyes were wide, confused, but not from pain, more from something awakening inside her body. A moment of silence. Jonas held her in his arms. Don't do this. Don't sacrifice yourself for me. Kael'yn gasped for breath. I don't know why I did it. Maybe, he said, we've crossed more than just a handshake. When his hand touched her wound, energy erupted. A burst of silver light emanated from the point of contact. Not hot, not cold, just pure. The creature stood still. Its systems began to glitch. Abnormal biological link detected. Vey'nar frequency synchronized with human unit. Kael'yn opened her eyes. Her entire body was surrounded by a layer of light, like living armor. The wound healed before Jonas's eyes. She stood up, no longer a warrior. She was a spear of light. She looked at Jonas with an entirely different gaze, recognition. You are my missing piece. One of millions of probabilities. Jonas still didn't understand, but no longer doubted. In the light emanating from her, he felt one strange thing, absolute trust. Kael'yn dove back into the battle, this time with the primal power of the Vey'nar, the kind that once made entire empires tremble. One strike through the armor. One slash, splitting the hybrid beast in half. The cyborg flesh exploded into glowing ash. Silence returned. Kael'yn stood amid the burning hallway, her hair flowing gently in the artificial air. Jonas stepped closer. What are we? She turned to him. Her eyes glowed. A disaster or a miracle. From afar, the camera systems silently transmitted the final image to a control center buried Deep beneath the core of Helion 9 Station, a voice echoed. Link has formed. Awakening has begun. Activate Phase 2. Hunt. Exterminate. At any cost. The hunt within the station. Nothing bonds two strangers faster than a death hunt. The red alarm tore through the silence like steel claws raking the air. The shrill wail echoed down the metallic corridors of Helion 9, where the flickering lights on the walls looked like they were burning the station alive, as if it were gasping its last breath. Kael'yn yanked Jonas out of the explosion and shouted, "They're coming, not regular guards. They're self-programming hunters." Jonas slipped as he rounded a steep corner, nearly tumbling head over heels to the floor. His breath was ragged, and his gun trembled in his hands. "I thought you were supposed to be the most dangerous thing on the station," he panted. "Now, I'd like to rescind that statement." Kael'yn gave him a quick glance. For a brief moment, amid the strobe of lights and the screech of metal, she almost smiled. Almost. A shriek, a blast of heat, a shadow darted past like a demon. "Jump, Kael'yn." They both threw themselves into the maintenance shaft. A plasma bolt swept past them, scorching the wall behind them to ash. Jonas crashed on top of Kael'yn for a split second, and they collided close enough to smell blood, sweat, fear, and something else, something strange, almost like a memory never lived. Jonas pushed himself up and reached out a hand. She looked at it, not the hand of a warrior, but the hand that had saved her. For the second time, they ran, dodging broken steel doors, racing through trembling engine rooms, gripping railings as the whole station tilted, threatening to tear itself apart. Behind them, the hunter didn't relent. A mechanized being, not human, not Vey'nar, a creation of a third party. The ones who had set the trap in Chapter 4. "There's an escape route below," Kael'yn said, darting past a cracked hallway. "The sublevel tech vault, where signals can't reach. But we'll have to pass through the plasma circulation chamber." Jonas glanced at her. "I know that place. And trust me, it's not the spot for a first date." Kael'yn didn't respond. She drew the energy blade from her arm, spinning it once. Jonas swallowed. "Well, maybe it's not a terrible idea." The battle started as they entered the circulation chamber. The only way out was through the gate that was rebooting. It would take 90 seconds to open. The hunter was inside, from mechanical limbs clinging to the walls, its head twisted backward, eyes glowing red like hellfire. Kael'yn charged forward, slashing with her blade. It cut deep, but the beast didn't bleed. It howled, tossing Jonas against the wall. "Jonas!" she shouted. In the deafening crash, Jonas struggled to rise, blood pouring from his mouth. He drew his energy pistol and fired at the propulsion column behind the creature. Sparks flew. The room shook. "We need to coordinate," he gritted out. "You hit, I take out the weak points." "Deal." Kael'yn gave a small laugh, but this time there was no mockery. "All right, human. 45 seconds." It was a fight like a deadly dance. Blood, sparks, shrieks, and ragged breaths. 30 seconds. Jonas was grabbed, his throat slammed against the wall. His vision began to blur. 15 seconds. Kael'yn let out a scream, not with words, but with a primal roar. She slashed down, not at the creature, but at the energy conduit leading into it. An explosion of light. The three of them were thrown back. When Jonas opened his eyes, Kael'yn was lying next to him. Her eyes were half-lidded, her lips whispering. "You still alive?" "Not dead yet. As long as you're lying on top of me like this," Jonas exhaled. She chuckled. For the first time, a real smile. The gate opened. They stepped into the dark corridor. No more warning lights. No more footsteps. Only the silence of the survivors. "I don't understand," Jonas murmured. "Why would there be a creature like that in a human station?" Kael'yn stopped. She looked deeply into him. Because there's something more dangerous than war. It's the secret cooperation between opposing forces. Jonas felt his skin crawl. You mean? Kael'yn clenched her fist. We need to tell you about the Vey'nar. The Vey'nar secret. There are truths not meant to exist in the light. And some species are raised on the darkness. The maintenance room on the lower deck had no windows. No sound. Only the dim light from the backup nuclear reactor system flickered weakly. They sat across from each other on the cold, icy floor, surrounded by charred cables and dusty, broken equipment. Kael'yn was silent for a long time. She looked at Jonas, not as a human, but as if she were looking at herself, in a mirror from a future yet to unfold. Jonas spoke softly, as if afraid of shattering something fragile in her. You once said, there's something more dangerous than war. What is it? Kael'yn looked up. Her eyes, no longer those of a warrior, but of a being who had seen too much, lost too much, and yet survived. Jonas, she began, her voice like an echo from a distant past. Do you know why the Vey'nar survived through 3 cycles of galactic alliances collapsing, yet we were never wiped out? Jonas shook his head slightly. Because we don't just fight well, we know how to hide in the glory. The beginning. When the Vey'nar were not warriors, Kael'yn spoke of their origins. When the Vey'nar were not infamous warriors, but genetic architects. They had once designed the biology of early civilizations, creating species, curing diseases, unlocking the genes of intellect, until they discovered something they should never have, the structure of will. Not just genes, but the encoding of emotion, resetting thoughts, directing fate. We began to reprogram not only the body, but belief itself, the very essence of existence, Kael'yn explained, until, as a race, we forgot who we were. The betrayal of history, the First Galactic Union, the Andarian Union, feared this power. They declared the Vey'nar a genetic threat to mental freedom. A campaign of extermination began. Billions of lives were wiped out simply because they carried the Vey'nar bloodline. But a small group escaped, not to take revenge, but to evolve, to hide, to be reborn. And I am a descendant of that group, created not just to fight, but to choose whether to resist or submit. The truth about Kael'yn Jonas stayed silent as Kael'yn stood up, removing a piece of armor from her left shoulder. Beneath, it was a biological mark, a broken double helix, the ancient symbol of the unbreakable will. I'm not the diplomatic envoy they say I am, she said. I'm an overseer sent to Helion 9 to track down and destroy an entity learning how to recreate ancient Vey'nar technology. The creature that was hunting us? Jonas asked. She nodded. It's a failed copy, but not the last one. The bond that is forming as silence fell between them again. But it was no longer cold. There was something warmer, silently creeping in, like the first light after a storm. You said you were created to choose, Jonas said softly. So, have you chosen? Kael'yn looked directly at him. Her eyes were no longer distant stars, but an open door to a tragedy that had silently waited for someone to step in. I've chosen Jonas, but that choice could kill us both. Jonas stood up. He walked toward her, not as a warrior, but as a human, facing the loneliness of a being created not to be loved. Then let me die with you, Kael'yn, but don't live alone in that armor anymore. She stood motionless. Her lips trembled slightly. For the first time in her life, a being programmed to control could not control her own heart. A kiss in zero gravity. There are things that don't need gravity to pull them down, like a gaze, like pain, like a kiss. Helion 9 Station, abandoned research pod. Deep within the core, the station's artificial gravity system had been crippled after the devastating attack. The entire space around them floated, like a mosaic of fragments, sharp metallic shards, pieces of paper drifting like tiny, erratic birds suspended between the vast, desolate sea of space. They were the only two beings adrift in an endless moment, indistinguishable from reality, from dream. Jonas and Kael'yn floated freely in the weightlessness of space, their small bodies like two planets orbiting each other, each moving in a different direction. But slowly, they found each other. The face without the iron mask. For the first time, Jonas saw Kael'yn without the faceplate of her warrior mask. Her long, black hair, once bound beneath the iron helm, now drifted freely like wisps of smoke in the quiet expanse. Her galaxy-colored eyes sparkled, reflecting the dim light from the surrounding metallic walls. No longer encased in armor, no longer a killing machine of a Vey'nar, Kael'yn was now just a woman carrying fears never before seen by anyone. She drifted in confusion, as if for the first time she was facing herself, a woman, not a warrior, not an enemy, but also not a friend. Jonas, despite the bleeding wound on his shoulders, smiled, a smile no longer full of strength, but filled with persistence. He smiled at her, a smile from a man who had nothing left to lose, but still believed in something, perhaps survival, perhaps a fragile hope, or simply her. I used to think zero gravity was a state of physics, he said, his voice deep and resonant in the silent void. Now I know, it's like the feeling I get when I look into your eyes, not knowing how much longer I'll be alive. A conversation beyond words. Kael'yn didn't respond. She just looked at him, her eyes like cosmic waves, silent and deep. Nothing could break the stillness, except for their very existence. The two of them, left alone in this space, no words, no bindings. The distance between them slowly shrank, not because of any gravitational pull, but because they were moving toward each other like two stars orbiting one another in an infinite universe. A convergence of two souls that needed no words. Only their gaze, only the understanding in this floating space. Kael'yn, Jonas called her name, this time not as a title, not as a rank or command. Just her name. A name, a moment of touching her true self. She looked at him. Her lips were pressed tightly, then gently parted like a flower blooming under dim light. Her eyes held a conflict, an inner turmoil she had never dared face. She was a warrior, programmed to fight and kill, but in this moment, she didn't know what to do with her emotions. "You don't understand me," she whispered, her voice resonating in the silence of the space. "I could kill you with a single punch. I could betray you. I was trained to do that without blinking." Jonas didn't flinch. His eyes never left her, unwavering and deep. "I know," he said softly, "but it was you who risked your life to save mine. You didn't have to do that, but you did. A different kind of attraction." And then, within that boundless space, another kind of pull appeared. Not from the outside, not the natural gravity of the universe, but an invisible pull from within. They, like two hearts without reason, moved toward each other. Not fast, not urgently. Each beat of their hearts guided them toward one another, slowly, like stars that couldn't escape each other's pull. No more distance, no more distinction. And then their lips met. It wasn't a kiss full of passion. It was a gentle kiss, like an exploration of being. A kiss not of desire, but of understanding. A touch at the edge of existence, where both human and non-human faced what they feared most: trust. Her first feeling. Kael'yn had killed hundreds of people, but she had never felt the stir within her body. Every death, every killing was just a programmed response. But when Jonas's lips touched hers, the sensation she felt wasn't like anything before. It wasn't pain, it wasn't a surge of battle excitement. It was safety, a safety she had never known. Was this the emotion humans called love? Or was it simply comfort in a broken moment of the world? She wanted to pull away, to deny the feeling, but she couldn't. It was like a bond she couldn't leave behind. When the siren interrupted everything. Suddenly, a sharp alarm blared, cold and piercing. Vey'nar, alpha-level biosign detected. Activating purging protocol. The space around them turned red, the lights flashing a warning of danger. The system was preparing to neutralize the unauthorized entity in the area, Kael'yn. Jonas could hesitate no longer. He shouted, voice full of urgency, "Run!" Kael'yn was about to retreat, but her eyes saw a truth she had never anticipated. Jonas wasn't running. He stood in front of her, unafraid. "What the hell are you doing?" she screamed, but Jonas only smiled sadly. "Is dying for you worth it?" he replied, his eyes filled with an unshakable resolve. "I used to live as if I didn't deserve to live," Jonas said, his voice gentle but heavy, "but for the first time, I think I deserve to die for something real." She chose. In that instant, Kael'yn made her decision. She took control of her biological systems, triggering the erase trace code, a self-destruct mechanism. But instead of self-destructing, she altered her genetic frequency, merging with the Helion station system. It was a betrayal of the Vey'nar, but it was the only way to save Jonas. The emergency escape system opened. Kael'yn took Jonas's hand. They plunged into the darkness, no longer lost. But this time, they were not alone. Betrayal from within. Sometimes, the enemy doesn't come from across the seas, but from the very person standing beside you. Helion 9 Station. Internal security, nightfall. In the heavy darkness of the empty corridor, Kael'yn could feel the tension in the air, as if everything were teetering on the edge of collapse. They had just escaped an assassination attempt, but the false calm only made her more anxious. The hurried footsteps they had heard earlier had faded, leaving only the pounding of her own heart, thudding like a relentless hammer. Though they had narrowly avoided the deadly trap, Kael'yn knew the danger within the heart of Helion 9 was far from over. Jonas Reed stood beside her, his eyes scanning the fortified doors. Everything around them was eerily still, but the strange sense of unease wouldn't go away. It felt as if instability was quietly stirring beneath the surface, ready to erupt at any moment. Kael'yn looked at him cautiously, but she couldn't detect any sign of concern in his eyes. Jonas seemed to fear nothing, always appearing calm, as if everything were under control. "We're being watched," Jonas said in his low, emotionless voice. "Not by the assassins, but by the Alliance." Kael'yn didn't reply, but a sinking feeling began to rise inside her. She turned quickly and headed toward the cockpit, needing a quiet place to collect herself. However, before she could make it very far, the sound of hurried footsteps broke her thoughts. A flash of light from some device reflected off the empty corridor walls. The trap in the dark. Kael'yn couldn't shake the growing sense of something amiss. They were not alone. This station held not only the beings she knew, but also the shadowy presence of plots waiting to unfold. That feeling sent a chill down her spine, but Jonas didn't seem worried in the least. She glanced at him again, but he only nodded slightly, as if everything were fine. His calmness only made her feel more uneasy. Jonas stopped abruptly, his gaze fixed on something in the distance. "Don't you see it? We're being watched." She turned back, and then, suddenly from deep in the shadows, a flicker of light. A communication signal. Something was wrong. Kael'yn quickly looked toward Jonas, but before she could react, a wave of dizziness hit her. The sharp scent of toxic smoke filled her nostrils, and she collapsed, hearing Jonas's panicked voice before everything went black. The snare closes. Jonas couldn't maintain his balance as a sudden hail of gunfire descended. He fell back, only able to see the darkness closing in around Kael'yn, now motionless. Chaos filled the air. His vision blurred, but he still fought to focus on her. Betrayal from within. Then, a shadow stepped from the darkness, trailing a small streak of light. Jonas couldn't believe his eyes when he recognized the figure, Lieutenant Rourke, the man he had always considered a close ally, the one who had stood by him, the one he had trusted above all others. "You must have seen this coming." Rourke's voice was cold, emotionless, as if everything had been planned from the start. Jonas froze, rage slowly building inside him, his eyes flashing with disbelief. What are you doing?" Rourke laughed, a humorless chuckle, full of contempt. "Kill an enemy or a dangerous pawn. You can't keep her alive." Jonas felt his body go stiff, as if everything within him had come to a halt. The painful truth began to unfold. Rourke was not an ally, but a traitor. Not just a pawn of the Alliance, but the one who had manipulated everything, luring them into a deadly trap. Jonas's choice. Rourke pointed at Kael'yn, still lying motionless, nearly lifeless. "Now you have a choice, Jonas. She dies here, or you die with her. Your call." Jonas felt his chest tighten, as if someone were squeezing the life out of him. All logic vanished, replaced by a seething fury. He would never let this betrayal slide. It felt like a fire raging inside him, and he didn't care what would come next. His eyes burned with determination. "If you're going to kill her, you'll have to kill me first." In an instant, Jonas drew his weapon and aimed it directly at Rourke. No more words were needed. The fight between them was inevitable. A duel for both sides. Rourke, quick as a flash, drew his blade. The clash of steel echoed through the quiet of the station. The gunfight between them was fierce, a brutal, unforgiving battle to the death. Kael'yn remained still, but in her subconscious, she could feel the chaos, the gunfire, the clash of metal. Jonas fought not only for himself. He fought for Kael'yn, for the trust he had placed in her. Life and death had become meaningless concepts now. Everything hinged on one thing, her survival. Running, but never turning away. In the end, Jonas prevailed. Rourke collapsed, but he was not dead. Still, Kael'yn remained unconscious, though at least she was no longer completely still. Jonas lifted her, his eyes set with determination. They were no longer part of the Alliance, no longer fighting for some ideal. Now, it was just the two of them, amidst the wreckage of a station that no longer offered safety. They ran, never looking back. They left Helion 9 behind, stepping away from a world that had betrayed them. They had no choice now but to head toward an unexplored planet, one with no protection, no alliances. And on this journey, one thing was certain: everything had changed forever. The forbidden planet sometimes, escape isn't freedom. But out here, in the cold silence of the cosmos, sometimes running is the only way to survive. The forbidden planet, outer edge of the borderlands. Kael'yn awoke to faint light bleeding through the cracks in the ceiling, casting cold streaks across her face. Her eyelids were heavy, her body still unfamiliar with this aching stillness. No searing pain like the injuries she'd suffered before, yet something was undeniably wrong. Each beat of her heart felt like the universe exhaling into endless quiet. Around her, the room was bare and crumbling. Damp walls, a dim, flickering light. It felt like a forgotten place, soaked in silence. Cold, empty, hollow, like the space inside her chest. The forbidden planet, she whispered, as if speaking the name aloud confirmed the truth she already knew. This was the place no power dared claim. The end of the map. For those cast aside by the galaxy, it was the last refuge. And maybe she was one of them now. Jonas sat beside her, his eyes dim with exhaustion. The kind of weariness that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from too many losses. But when she looked at him, she didn't see weakness. She saw a warrior driven to the edge. And still, somehow, holding on. A fire, flickering in his eyes, not yet gone out. Betrayed, beaten, but not broken. "We're still alive," he said quietly. His voice carried more than just truth. It was a lifeline, a fragile thread keeping them tethered to something real. He reached out, helping Kael'yn sit up. Her body swayed, dizziness hitting hard. But Jonas's calm, steady presence was an anchor. She steadied herself, feeling the chill of the room and the deeper cold inside her. Memories of betrayal clawed their way to the surface. They sat in silence, breathing into the stillness. Words felt pointless. Pain didn't need explaining. Kael'yn turned to Jonas, her eyes full of questions, none of which had answers. Why had it come to this? Why exile? Why betrayal? She didn't say it. She didn't have to. Jonas knew. He stood slowly and walked toward the door. Outside, the dark sky of Zothar loomed, a world untouched by mercy. This planet, it's called Zothar, he said. Exiles from the Alliance are sent here. Not all of them die. Kael'yn listened, unsure of the weight behind his words. But she understood one thing clearly. Zothar wasn't safe. It was a graveyard of forgotten lives. And in its shadows, darker things stirred. Things that never slept. Yet somehow, facing that truth brought her face to face with her own past, the Vey'nar. Memories burned, a home lost to war, a family torn away, faces she would never see again. It was pain that never faded. But when she looked at Jonas, something shifted. Not just resilience in him, something deeper. Unspoken longing, quiet uncertainty. Like her, he had nothing left, but he still chose to keep moving forward. Jonas, she started, but her voice faltered, choked back by the weight in her throat. Too much to say, too much they'd endured. Life wasn't simple anymore. Loss had reshaped them, and maybe now there was only one choice left. Jonas turned, his gaze sharp, resolute. We can't stay here. Zothar isn't safe. I have a contact, someone who might help us get out. Kael'yn didn't question it. She was too tired for doubts. The why didn't matter anymore. The how didn't either. All that mattered was that they had to keep going. Find a way. Anyway. Jonas had already packed. Time was slipping. Whatever came next, it wouldn't wait. Their lives weren't what they used to be, but they still had a choice. Fight to live. Fight to find meaning again. Kael'yn rose, slowly, and looked out the broken window. The darkness of Zothar still pressed heavy on the horizon, but something inside her had shifted. She wasn't afraid anymore. They were survivors, and they weren't done yet. When she stopped being a weapon, she was made to kill. Now she just wants to live. And for the first time, she's not ashamed of that. The Red Planet, where wounds no longer bleed. The landscape before them looked like a painting left behind by madness. Spiral-shaped rock formations jutted out from the crimson sand like the ribcage of some ancient beast, long since decayed. The planet had no name on the Alliance star maps, just a blind spot in the interstellar system, once the site of chemical warfare between fallen empires. The air was breathable, but heavy like memory pressing down on your lungs. Kael'yn and Jonas had built a makeshift shelter in the crevice of a rock wall. A shredded mesh from their crashed ship flapped in the wind, barely keeping the sandstorms at bay. She didn't say much, just quietly checked her weapons and armor. But for the first time, her movements didn't feel like a soldier's. It was more like muscle memory, like folding clothes to keep your mind off grief. As she slid her plasma blade back into its sheath, her eyes met Jonas's. There was no edge to her gaze this time, just a flicker of something lost. Jonas watched her from a distance, cradling a flickering laser rifle. He'd seen a lot of soldiers in his time, but Kael'yn, she was different. Not because of the scar over her shoulder or the way her stare could slice through steel. It was the loneliness behind all, a void in her soul so vast it made him shiver, like she'd swallowed every star that had ever tried to reach her. What would you do, he asked, if you weren't a warrior? She looked up. The question cut through her like a blade slipping past armor. I don't know. He smirked. I don't buy that. Everyone dreams about something, even if they're programmed not to. She stared at him for a long time, then turned away. I once wanted a real name. Kael'yn's not your real name. It's a code. Prototype Vey'nar, Alpha Class Eradicator. Jonas paused, not in fear, but in something close to sadness. Then he smiled gently. Then from now on, I'll call you Lynn. She raised an eyebrow. What does it mean? Nothing. just softer. A long silence. Then out of nowhere, she laughed, a sound brittle like ice cracking under spring sun. Stolen memories, the nightmare that lingers. That night, as the red sun sank beneath a toxic horizon, Kael'yn lay awake in the sand, eyes wide open. She didn't sleep. Bioengineered soldiers like her weren't made for rest. But no one ever warned her about dreams, the kind that clawed at the mind, even without sleep. Flashes came, uninvited, a child screaming, clutching her wrist, blood pooling beneath their feet. A command echoed, eliminate the target. Then a scream, her own. She had killed, not out of hate, not for a cause, just because she was told to. She rolled over, burying her face in her arm, trying to slow the pounding in her chest. A soft rustle. Jonas sat up, half asleep, eyes heavy but full of concern. "Lynn, you okay?" She didn't answer, but in the pale moonlight, he saw her shoulders tremble. He didn't ask again, just gently reached out and touched her hand, barely a gesture, but fully present. She flinched, but didn't pull away. Something unfamiliar bloomed inside her. Like maybe, just maybe, not every memory had to be programmed. The hunt begins, shadows from a past. 3 days later, they were found. From the torn sky, a crescent-shaped squadron of hunter ships appeared, hovering over the cliffs. Erasure unit. Government-paid mercs sent to retrieve living assets. Kael'yn didn't need a scanner to know. They were here for her. "They're here because of me," she whispered. Jonas shook his head. "No, they're here for the wrong reason, and I'm going to show them the right one." They ran across brutal terrain, where every step could crumble beneath them, where moonlight made the glowing rocks pulse with eerie life. Sandstorms sliced through the dark, cutting visibility to nothing. Kael'yn tripped, cried out, told Jonas to run ahead. But he turned back, pulled her up, growling, "Lynn, we do this together. Don't you ever order me to die for you." She bit her lip, her eyes burning with fear and fury. But in that moment, she no longer felt like a weapon. She felt chosen, held on to. The final stand, choosing her own name. They were cornered in a cave filled with bioluminescent crystals, structures that pulsed like living lungs. Erasure unit sealed the exits. One step forward, removing his helmet. Lieutenant Morris, the one who'd programmed her in the Vey'nar project. "You belong to us, Kael'yn. Come back and you'll be repurposed. No more pain, no more dreams." She stood still, eyes calm. Jonas reached for his weapon, but she stopped him. Then, slowly, she stepped forward. "I was a weapon. Now, I choose to be human." She pulled her plasma blade, not to kill, but to slice the tracker from her wrist. Blood spilled. Simple act. But she knew freedom always had a price. A firefight erupted. Jonas nearly got shot. Kael'yn dove in, took the hit for him. Not fatal, but enough to stagger her. He grabbed her, helped her run. They used a volatile crystal to blast open a way out. Blue light erupted behind them like a pulse of hope. Mara's, left behind in the rubble, kept repeating her code name, unable to fathom how a machine could betray its maker. When even nightmares learn to smile. A week later, they reached an abandoned rescue station. From there, Jonas transmitted a distress signal to the nearest neutral station. They sat beneath the fading lavender sunset of a dying world. Kael'yn, no, Lynn, leaned on his shoulder. No longer a code, no longer a weapon, just a soul learning how to be alive. Jonas, yeah. Thank you for giving me a name. He smiled. That name's yours now, just like this life. She looked down. Then slowly, like someone learning how to feel, she lifted her head and whispered, "I never knew what gentle felt like. Now I'm starting to wonder, does love feel even lighter than battle?" Jonas laughed. "Definitely not, but at least no one shoots you when you hug them." She laughed too. For real this time. And in that sound, the nightmare cracked, and something new began. Fragile, uncertain, but real. Thank you for watching Sci-Fi Alien Stories. If you love sci-fi tales about aliens and cosmic mysteries, make sure to hit like to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss the next thrilling story. What do you think about today's story? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you're the first to uncover new mysteries. See you in the next video.